Okay, so I think we all have to accept that, and then I'm going to start now. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Film Festival's Creative Conference. This is the Empowering Indie Voices and Strengthening the Community by Partnering with SAG-AFTRA panel, and we're so happy you're here. I am CarrieAnne Hunt. I am an actress and a filmmaker. I also write, direct, produce, and coach. And I've been a proud SAG-AFTRA member for almost 15 years now. I also helped to found a local committee that we have, a volunteer committee called the Indie Outreach Committee, where our whole mission is to help educate indie filmmakers, to help sort of debunk the funk around all the paperwork and the process, so that when you are looking at your creative vision, you can have exactly what you want. You don't have to worry about the barrier of paperwork, or you only have one pool of actors to choose from. So we're just here today. We've got a great panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Alison, go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alison Wise, and I am the Executive Director of the SAG-AFTRA Atlanta Local. And I'm glad to be here, and hopefully you will learn a lot from this panel. I just wanted to say that the union, if you don't know, we represent performers, and I hope you know that, but if you don't, we represent performers. And we have Atlanta members here, roughly almost 4,000 local SAG-AFTRA members. And we want to help you put these members to work in your projects. So we have a contract for almost any level budget you have. And we are user-friendly and want to work with you. We have business reps that can handhold and give you all the information that you need if you're a first-time producer, so you can cast our SAG-AFTRA members and get the best professional talent you can for your project.
Fantastic. Jess?
Hi, my name is Jess W. Speaker III. I am the Senior Business Representative here in the Atlanta Local. I have been in the entertainment industry one way or another for the past 35 years. Spent about the last 18 focused on the labor union aspect of it, and the last nearly 12 years working for SAG-AFTRA. I started in the Washington Mid-Atlantic Local and then came to Atlanta now about 4.5, 5 years ago. So what I do mostly in the office is I enforce the contract. So I work with the signatory producers to right the wrongs that sometimes happen on set, and fight for the performers and go up against the producers to make sure that everything is taken care of that needs to be taken care of.
Awesome. Michael?
And I'm Michael Mao. I am a proud SAG-AFTRA member, also a member of the WGA. So yes, actor, writer, producer accidentally, I think. And I think I'm a baby SAG-AFTRA member. I think 4 years. I was a pre-member for a lot longer than I've been a member. But I had a whole other career before this. So.
Awesome. Well, and I think a lot of us, like, I know for me, I was sort of an accidental producer too. I sort of fell into it from my being an actor and just wanting to do more. And we're, natural storytellers. And when you have a lot of your writing and your acting and all that stuff, the natural progression is to be a producer. And I was really pleased and delighted with how easy the process is, particularly if you're a new filmmaker and you're just wanting to like get your feet wet, maybe do a short film. If you're a student filmmaker, if we've got any students watching, there are also student agreements that I feel like get overlooked a lot. They just sort of assume they have to go non-union because they're not paying and they're a student film, which is not true. So I'm really excited. That was part of why I helped to found the Indie Outreach Committee, because I would talk to other producers that would say, oh, it's too hard. Oh, it's going to cost me a bunch of money. Oh, there's all these rules, and then you kind of come to find out the rules are mostly just basic human decency, like feed us, and don't work us 24 hours a day and don't make us do dangerous things. But yeah, so I think that's a good place for us to start, is sort of like demystifying a little bit and sort of debunking. And I feel like this is a really good one for both Alison and Jess, and Michael and I can chime in too, but sort of what do you see the most as like common misconceptions, and what is the correct information?
I can just start and say that I feel like a lot of producers maybe just think that we're the big bad union, and that we're going to file claims against them or be hard to work with. Like you said, tons of paperwork. And that's just not true, because we want our members to work just as much as you want to produce your project. And so that's why we're really user friendly, at least here in the Atlanta local, and we can help you get that project done. So that's the big thing, is I think maybe just taking that first step and learning a little bit more about us, and taking that leap of hiring a union member. I mean, because it's only going to make your project better. I'm sure Jess has more to add.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to start by agreeing. I mean, I look at a lot of what I do at SAG-AFTRA all over, I mean, across the board, but especially when it comes to the indie producers, as a partnership, right? We want our independent filmmakers that we work with to be successful. We want your projects to be successful. I know I'm going to go out on a limb here and speak for Alison and my other colleagues across the country, but we really take a lot of pride when we see a show that we worked on, right? As much as we work on these shows, do well. Whether it's an independent film and you scroll through and you see it on Hulu or whatever, you're like, oh wow, that's great. I remember that was an ultra low budget project agreement. Like you're really proud of films that you helped the producer on. It's not like you were on set doing things with the movie, but really proud of the projects that come from your area and feature the members and the performers that you work with. And also the paperwork thing, right? It's so much, especially I hear that from students all the time and I tell students when I talk to students about using our performers, I often say, I guarantee you've spent more time on social media this morning than it takes to actually fill out the paperwork for a student film. Now that's true for the student film. When you get with a bigger budget, like obviously if you're signing a $700,000 film, it's going to be a little bit more paperwork than that. But it's all pretty, proportional. If you are at the point where you are looking to cast performers and you're looking at SAG-AFTRA members, a lot of the information that's on the paperwork you probably know and is readily available for you. And in addition to that, we are here, myself, the folks in our office here in Atlanta, and our colleagues who help in the signatory process are also here to help work with you. The number of times that I've had a producer send something to me and I'm like, that's not exactly what I asked for. Like, here's what I really need. Like, go through and be like, okay, cool. Now add this, and now add this piece of information, and then that's what we need. It's not one of those, well, nope, you fill this out wrong. You're done as a filmmaker. Nice try. Go to accounting school. It's
Well,
a partnership.
I can say that from personal experience. I've worked with you before on projects that I've produced, and it's always been a really easy experience. And I love what you say, I love what you said.
You love what you said.
I love what you said. Not that I haven't been in Georgia that long. But I love what you said about the paperwork being proportional, because that's absolutely true, especially I love that the micro budget agreement exists. For those of you who don't know, if you've got a budget of under 20,000 or less, you can go on the micro budget agreement. And there are some restrictions if you have hazardous stunts or you need an intimacy coordinator, this is not the agreement for you. But if you're just doing a little short film with your friends, it's great. And that process takes like 5 or 10 minutes. It's almost nothing, and the same thing with like the SPA agreement and the student film. So I love that you said that it's proportional, because it is. And by the time you get to the point where you're producing a contract that's a $750 million project, you've got a lot more support in your staff. You've got probably have some more knowledgeable people at that point. So I love what you said. The contracts do kind of grow with you. Yeah.
Well, CarrieAnne, you had said earlier when you were introducing yourself, something about how you think it's going to be hard, but then you come to find out that it's not. And it's the coming to find out part that, like, as an independent producer, my first producing gig was a fiction podcast, and I had absolutely no idea how to even. I mean, I was a union member, but I didn't know anything about signatories. And so my coming to find out was, started with scouring the SAG-AFTRA website and just trying to wrap my head around it. And really, as soon as I contacted someone, a human being at SAG-AFTRA, immediately all that anxiety just drained. And I was like, oh, that's it? That's all I need to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I was just I went from being just completely overwhelmed, and I only wanted to do it. I think you and I talked about this earlier, before we started recording. I only needed to get a signatory so I could hire myself.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's how a lot of it started for us that are those of us that are actors that also became producers. But I do want to, because I bet you we have some actors watching this. And one thing that I think is important for an actor to know, I think it's really important for an actor to know these indie agreements as well, because I have flipped many projects that I've wanted to work on. Like occasionally, like especially if it's a short film or something like that, I will, in my little submission notes, when I submit myself, I'll type a little note and say, I'm union, but don't be scared. I can help you. It's not going to cost you a whole bunch of extra money. And then I offer to either help with the process, usually for a producer credit, or I will kind of teach them how to do the process themselves, because I want there to be more out there so that we can do more work. I think it's an important part of strengthening the indie community here in Georgia and in any local market you might be watching from, especially those outside of New York and LA. It's a really good way to start building up the professionalism of your market and widen your scope as far as what's possible and really take the ceiling off a bit
Mhm.
for your filmmaking. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about turning a production, and the number of productions where either the producer director has contacted me and asked if I wanted to be a part of the project, or things that I've just seen on Actors Access that were listed as non-union. Um, and I've done the same thing. You just reach out and say, look, I would love to be a part of this. It sounds as a great script, etc. Let me help you to get the right signatory.
Mhm.
And I recently, they're still in the signatory process, but I had it's an indie production, ultra low budget, would be an ultra low budget signatory, which like you said was under 20,000, but the
That's
project contains nudity.
Oh yeah, the micro budget, the ultra
Micro
low.
budget, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Well, so yeah, so the project contains nudity, so it doesn't qualify for a micro budget.
Mhm.
Um, but even then, just reaching out to either just reading something on the SAG-AFTRA website, or reaching out to Alison or Jess to just get information. What do I need? Is this going to make my budget go higher? And simple things like liability insurance, for example, which is actually very affordable for indie filmmakers.
Yeah.
And
So
you're actually talking
even
to, we're
going
actually
above that
talking to a
micro
producer
budget level
now.
doesn't have to break the bank.
Right. What
Yeah, we're
else?
actually talking to a producer now that, Michael, you sent our way to try to make that a SAG-AFTRA project for you.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think one of the most important things, like if I was going to give advice to producers that are like SAG-AFTRA curious, about making their project signatory, is ask questions. Because a lot of times when I would talk to producers, like when we would do events as the Indie Outreach Committee at various gatherings and things, we would have people come up to us that say, oh, well, I was gonna, but I saw this thing, or some other filmmaker who is not as knowledgeable has told them something that they've heard through the grapevine, and then that person has taken that as you know, the law and has decided to just turn the other way. And I feel like there's always a way to make it work. And a lot of times I would see producers that would come talk to me that they would have the budget to be signatory. They'd be almost practically doing everything already, but somebody had just said one thing to them that they took to be the truth and they didn't take the time to investigate. So, and also if you are wherever you're producing, talk to the local office of the place where you are producing, because they're going to be the most able to help you, the most able to be hands-on with you. Because I've had a lot of people too that, you know, they're producing something in Georgia, but they called LA, you know, which is LA is great if you're producing in LA. But if you're producing in Georgia, call Georgia. So that's another thing too. I think it just goes a long way to really be curious and ask questions and actively have an open mind about problem solving versus just shutting down at the very thought of something that someone has told you. Jess, do you have any stories you'd like to share?
I do. I was like, I need to jump in on this.
Come on in.
So I just want to follow up and expand and then tell some stories. Ask questions. I will say too, also give yourself enough time. I will say in my experience, a lot of the producers I've worked with who have had overwhelming, frustrating situations is because they start shooting on Monday and call us a week before and want to sign a project that's got a $200,000 budget. Like, well, that's going to be really difficult. Give yourself the time. You know, I don't want to say there's no such thing as too much time. Like if you call and say, yeah, we're going to shoot this thing in 2027, we're going to say, yeah, call us back in a couple years. But, you know, the guidance is typically, you know, 6 to 8 weeks. A little more than that is perfectly fine, because that way you don't get blindsided by the, you know, okay, I see on your information form that you have children, stunts, puppeteers, and nudity. Those are going to trigger some questions some conversations we need to have, you know. Whereas like, well, we're trying to shoot on Monday and it's Friday at 3:30. We're not going to have, you know, that's going to be difficult. The other thing too is when you are doing your research before you reach out to SAG-AFTRA staff, really be wary of information you find that is not on the SAG-AFTRA website.
Do not ask ChatGPT. I
Well,
saw a forum recently where somebody said, who's correct, ChatGPT or my SAG rep? And I thought, SAG-AFTRA rep. And I thought, it's your rep. It's the real person. ChatGPT is taking like an amalgamation from across the internet and making things up half the time. Like trust the rep.
Right, and a lot of the things that you see on the internet where you know producers share their horror stories about SAG-AFTRA, get ready for a shocker here. They're not telling you the whole story lots of times, right? I had a producer that I was working with when I was in the Washington local who you know, we were going through the process. He was asking all these great questions, and they said, well, I thought XYZ. And I said, well, that's interesting. Where did you get that impression? And he sends me a link to a blog post. And I read the blog post. Happens to be another production that I had signed. And he talked about this producer, he or she, I don't remember, you know, was talking about all of these unexpected expenses and how it cost them X amount of dollars more. And I read it and I knew exactly what production it was. And what I wanted to say is, well, what you didn't take into account was that you weren't planning to pay overtime until they worked more than 12 hours, and that's not allowed. Also, you weren't giving meal breaks. Also, like it was like, well, you got all of these, you know, unexpected expenses because you didn't read the basic, you know, like you didn't read the you know, the simple parts of the agreement, you know, the basic information. So you hear a lot of horror stories, but there's also a lot of other information. So if you read those, you know, bring up those questions to the rep that you talk to. But really, it's a lot easier and a lot less stressful for you as a producer just to not read those things.
Yeah.
And Jess, I want to actually ask something as a follow-up to that, because part of the title of this is strengthening the community. And you mentioned, you know, two items, one meal breaks and the other overtime. And for especially newer indie producers, newer indie filmmakers, these might not be things that they even consider. And so they might look at that and go, oh, we have to like we have to think about that. And I don't know any of us can speak to this, but part of why we are in this union is to protect ourselves as laborers, as performers. And as a producer, you really want to be aware of how you're treating the people that you are hiring. And if you aren't taking, or if you aren't willing to take into consideration how much time people are going to be on set, whether or not you're providing a safe space and a meal, um, you know, these are things that just should be common sense, but that, maybe it takes someone like their SAG-AFTRA rep or business manager to explain, this is part of what you're doing. This is, what you have to consider.
Yeah, I think sometimes, in the development and pre-production stage, especially when you've got a newer producer, everyone's hair is on fire, and sometimes they're just not thinking about some things. Sometimes it's not out of a place of being intentional about wanting to not be fair to their performers, but I think it can get lost in the shuffle of budget and locations and all that kind of stuff. And so I think you're right, Michael. I think it's a good reminder, to be like, hey, you might want to feed them every 6 hours, Hey, if you've got this dangerous sounding stunt, you really need to get the right people in there to make sure that nobody gets hurt. And I think for actors, it can be a good sort of litmus test, right? Like if a production wants to work with you, but they're not willing to take your basic needs and safety into consideration, then maybe that's not a production that you want to be a part of, you know? But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, because I feel like if I were a new producer and I was listening to us talk, what would I want to know about? So, do you guys want to just say a little bit about the contracts, like just a little bit about each one, just to give people a little bit of a taster about it? Look at Alison.
Sure.
Alison.
I mean, I could talk about a few of them, and then Jess can. And so the micro budget, it's our newest contract, and so it's for budgets that are 20,000 or less, and so it's for producers, and it's a very simple, streamlined contract. And you go online to our website, sagaftra.org, and you can apply online, and you just have to answer some questions, give some information, and then you're basically approved on the spot. It might take 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little longer for you to get an email, but you'll get an email. And if you're approved, you'll get the performer acknowledgement forms attached to those emails, and you have the performer sign those forms. And you really just need to read over those forms and the agreement. So if the performers have questions about it, because this is a totally negotiable contract. And so all the terms are negotiated. And then there also are some restrictions. And I think we mentioned and touched on a few of these earlier. There's no nudity or simulated sex allowed under this contract. There are no hazardous stunts allowed. And if someone is paid on this contract, they do not get the pension and health paid on their behalf. So you can, decide to pay them, but you don't pay into their pension and health. Is there anything else I'm missing about the micro?
I think probably one thing I think that's important is the pay is negotiable. So if you're doing a micro budget agreement and you qualify for it, you can defer their pay. You can have them volunteer their time to just collaborate with you on a passion project. You can pay them if you want to, but it removes the fringes of having to say pay into the pension and health. What I like about it is that it's really one piece of paperwork that you give to the actors, and it's an acknowledgement that they acknowledge that SAG-AFTRA is not actively, you're not interacting with a business rep, and that you kind of know what you're getting into, and you've done your due diligence, and they've done their due diligence about complying with everything. So that's what makes that one so easy. That was such an amazing step forward, I feel like, for indie film, because it really makes it, if you've got, $2,000 and you want to do a 5-minute short film with a buddy of yours and you're both in the union, you can go do it, Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly what it was made for.
Yeah. that I had mentioned earlier, the micropod agreement, which is the companion, which allows, podcasts are becoming, especially fiction podcasts, scripted podcasts are becoming a lot more popular, and you can hire your SAG-AFTRA voice actors on a micropod agreement, which it helped me a lot. I mean, I got to hire myself, but I also got to hire several amazing actors all over the world, recording remotely. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Jess, do you have anything you want to add to the micro?
No, I mean, I think that really covers the micro. And again, one thing, no, I don't have anything to add. Let me add something. One of the things about the micro is there is not a length limit. So a micro budget can be used for a short film. It can be used for a feature film. It can be used for, as long as the budget meets the budget requirement, right? If you're making a 5-hour film for $10,000, well, then great, do that. That's fine under the micro budget.
Peter Jackson's micro budget. Yeah. Well, and also too, it can be if you were doing something episodic, like you were doing a web series, it's 20,000 per episode, right? Not total.
Correct. And there are some exhibition limitations with the micro budget, in terms of, you can't necessarily make a micro budget and then sell it to subscription-based video on demand. There are some slight limitations, but to be honest, for the majority of projects that are looking at the micro budget, the exhibition allowances are exactly what they're looking for anyway.
Right. So it's like film festivals, free to user platforms,
Yeah.
social media. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Do you want to talk about the SPA agreement? I like that the acronym is now SPA because it just automatically makes you relax about the paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about the short project agreement as well, which is the SPA. And then I know Jess works really closely with students, so he could cover the student film agreement. And he has a great presentation for that. So he knows all about that. But the short project agreement is wonderful because it allows you to produce a short and hire our members. And so you still go online to SAG-AFTRA.org and you begin the signatory process online by answering some questions, and then you're assigned a business rep. And so you are assigned that rep wherever you are shooting. And so then if you don't have everything, this is a little tidbit that I think will help producers. A lot of times within any budget that they're applying for the signatory online, sometimes they get caught and they're like, I don't know how to answer that question, or it won't let me move forward. And so I've learned that you can put TBA or TBD, to be determined, and you can also upload a placeholder. So you shouldn't upload a placeholder for every single thing. We really do need to see your budget, and we really, but if you are in the midst of doing your application and you don't have the one piece of paperwork for your company, let's say you're an LLC, and you don't have that document with you, you could upload a placeholder and say, I'll give this to my rep later, and then you can move forward. Because what's going to happen is, and this is maybe what isn't explained that well when you're doing the signatory app, is you're going to be assigned a rep, and you can go back and forth with that rep and to complete the process, so you can give them the paperwork that's needed at that time. So that's a really big helpful tip that I always give producers when they call me. Because a lot of times they're calling me while they're on the phone, like, oh no, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't know the answer to this, that type of thing. So, but anyway, for the short project agreement, you apply online, then you're assigned a rep, and then you'll go back and forth with that rep. Just some of the documents you may need. You can sign as an individual, or you can sign as a company if you have a true company that is an LLC or that's incorporated. So we'll ask you for some of those documents, like the articles of incorporation, or the operating agreement, the certificate of formation. So we're going to ask for those. We're going to ask for a pre-production cast list. So any of your cast that you're hiring, you're going to, write that on the form, write how many days you're hiring them for, if you're paying them, the rate that you're paying them. We're going to ask you for that. We're going to ask you for your budget, and we're going to review all of that. We're going to ask you for a day out of days or your shooting schedule. So these are just some of the initial things that we ask for. And then what happens is once we get all those documents and we, we're going to review the script, we're going to make sure, if you do have stunts, if you are hiring minors, if you do have weapons, that we're going to give you all of the bulletins that you need and all the information you need that surrounds hiring minors or stunt performers, and make sure you have a stunt coordinator. If you have weapons, you have an armorer. So we're going to go through all of that with you. And then once we have everything and we send you the signatory documents, there's some more things that you fill out. Then we can finish the process by giving you the agreement. And we usually do that via DocuSign. And we send that to you and you sign it. And then we provide you with a clearance email, because you should not work. Performers should not travel. Performers should not have a table read, rehearse, or work until they get that clearance email from us. And in that clearance email, we provide documents, production documents for you to use during your shoot, like Exhibit Gs, a final cast list form that you're going to fill out at the end, performer contracts. And so I know that's a lot of information, but I'm just trying to.
No, you're good. I
was
going to say, just to add to that, the short project agreement is $50,000 or less.
Right.
Of the budget, needs to be shot in the United States. And an Exhibit G is basically a timesheet that keeps track of when your actors, travel time, when they're on set, meal breaks, all that stuff is on an Exhibit G, and that's something that you fill out every day, that you keep with all your paperwork to give to your rep. And there was and talk about the exhibition for this. The short project agreement is film festivals and free to user platforms also, right?
Yeah. And also another thing we didn't mention was that it's 40 minutes or less.
Right.
The length of the project. Yeah,
that's a good one as well. And one place that, just before I forget, one place that I like to go that's a good resource for me, we've got SAG-AFTRA.org, where you can go. There's the production center, has literally everything you could ever hope and dream for. And I think now there are even videos that walk you through the contracts, which is pretty amazing. There's also SAG Indie. Is it sagindy.org? I think. Yeah. And one thing that I love about them that's really quick and easy, if you just want to look at something really fast to just sort of see where you land, if you go to become a signatory on their site, they have a nice chart where they've got all the contracts listed and like just the bullet points of those. So if you're just overwhelmed and you're like, where do I start? I just want some basic information about like what the budget requirements are and what the pay rates are and things like that. That's a good place to start if you just want to see it all in one spot. And then you can go to the production center and look at that specific agreement in detail to kind of get a good idea. And I recommend people do that before you talk to your rep, just so that you are, for the sake of, look at Alison. Alison's like, yes, please. But that you really, do the work, do your homework, put the work in, and make sure that you're as prepared as you can be before you contact your rep. But also don't be afraid to not know something, to need help. That's different than not being prepared, right? Do what you can do and then come to the rep to help you with the rest.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing, because on our website, you can download a sample agreement of the short project or any of our contracts. And I'm just surprised that even sometimes after the process and I'm giving the producers the DocuSign, and they'll still come back and just ask me the most basic question, like they haven't read the agreement. And like you said, we want to be helpful, but you really should be prepared. You should go to our site and read the sample agreement. And then if you can still come and ask us if you aren't seeing it, or if you just want to clarify. I mean, sure, we want to help, but I think that's a totally valuable thing to know, is that you really should be prepared and look over things before you produce it.
And that's also one thing that I hear a lot is sometimes they haven't done any casting yet, and you need a SAG-AFTRA actor attached to justify the agreement. So what would your advice be? This is a little bit of a sidetrack, but just something that popped into my brain. If you've got a producer who's like, I want to be able to use union actors, but we haven't started the casting process yet, what does that look like for you guys?
They can still do that.
Yeah.
They can still contact us first. They can still apply first. We just can't have them sign and give them the DocuSign to sign the agreements until they have a performer that's a
So they can
SAG-AFTRA
start
member.
the process.
They can
Yeah.
start it, yes.
And they don't
And
have
actually, I would highly recommend doing so. On the pre-production cast list that Alison mentioned, it's a form for one thing, just so everyone knows it's a form. Don't just send us a list of actors and roles. I've gotten a lot of that. I'm like, oh, no. So send us the pre-production cast list, and where to ask for the performer's name, you can just put TBD. Like literally, we can go through almost the entire process, like Alison said, except for sending you the agreement to sign. So that way, one of the reasons why I recommend starting the process, if you think you might hire a SAG-AFTRA performer, is so that when someone calls and says, hey, I was told that, movie XYZ is going to be a SAG-AFTRA project.
Mhm.
Well, if they've started the paperwork, then it's in our system, and myself or Alison or anyone else can look it up and say, yeah, they're in the process of signing, just make sure that they're signed before you do, as opposed to, I don't know anything about that project, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And that is just an honest answer, because we don't know that they plan on signing unless they've started the paperwork.
Right. And the other thing too is that when you're producing and you're casting, and if you put your casting calls out on Actors Access, in order for you to say, they can list it as pending. They can say, like, SAG-AFTRA ultra low project agreement parentheses pending, but they do require you to provide a production number and provide proof that you've been talking to SAG-AFTRA. And so that allows you in your casting process, if you start early, because I've had so many people go, oh my gosh, they asked me for a SAG-AFTRA actor, I don't have anyone attached, and then they just don't do it, and that's some great advice. So I didn't mean to interrupt the flow of our contract talking, but I just felt like that was a really important note. And then also it's a preliminary cast list, right? So you don't have to have every single role cast, because you do a final cast list at the end of shooting.
Right. So yeah, the preliminary cast list is, who you've got at that point in time, right? It'll change. Things in this business change, right? Crazy. The cast list changes, and you just update your rep as you go along. If you submit a preliminary cast list, pre-production cast list, and you have the TBD actor, and then you end up casting and you don't hire any SAG-AFTRA performers, then just let us know. Hey, we're cast, I didn't cast any members. And it's like, great, thank you. We'll talk to you next time. Best of luck with your film.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one other little myth I'd like to bust is the sort of the myth that I hear a lot, where there's this sort of feeling that the union actors are better than everyone else, which is completely not true. When, the goal in educating about the SAG-AFTRA agreements is to give you, as the filmmaker, creative freedom, for you to be able to realize your vision exactly the way you want to, without having to be limited by fear of paperwork, or not knowing, because the not knowing and whatever you make up about the process is going to be way worse. Like Michael was saying earlier, and like I've said before, once you get in it, it's really not that bad.
Right.
Yeah. So what's the next agreement? Oh, the student.
Oh, I just wanted to say something really quick on to follow up on what CarrieAnne said. It was about breakdown services, or if they want to list you with a casting company. So we don't give out their production ID number until they're signed, but we can speak to or email with breakdown services and other casting companies and let them know that they are pending and actually are talking to us, and they're not just making it up like I've contacted SAG-AFTRA. We can verify it. And so if they're asking you as a producer for the ID number and you don't have it, you can also just give them our email address and we can verify it for you, so you can get that listed on the casting services.
Fantastic. Yeah. So Jess, do you want to talk about the student film agreement?
Yeah. So the student film agreement is very similar to the SPA in terms of actually the process, the signatory process that Alison outlined, pretty much from the SPA on up is very similar, just to various degrees. Like we said earlier, the more money you're spending, the more paperwork there is, the more documents we need. The student film agreement is specific to students, right? Big surprise. You do have to be enrolled in a educational institution. It does have to be a requirement for class, but it covers specifically the professional performers. It does not cover you don't cover your roommate who's the anthropology major who wants to be in your film. Cool, that's great. I hope they do well. What it is we're covering the professionals because you've got that one specific role that you just can't find. The process is very similar. The paperwork in terms of the production paperwork is the same. The Exhibit G, the contracts, the final cast list. On the student film agreement, there is deferred payment, right? So what deferred payment means is not that the performer is working for free. It means that there is a wage that may or may not end up being paid, okay? Deferred payment has nothing to do with how much money the filmmaker makes. It has to do with where the project is exhibited. And in the student film agreement, you can show it on public access television. You can enter it into film festivals. You can show it in class. Obviously, that would be a kind of a bad thing if we didn't include that one, right? You can show it in class for a grade, and you can use it as a visual resume. If it goes anywhere outside of that, that is when the deferred payment is activated, right? That's when it comes in. So if you are going to, show it at a movie house that's not part of a film festival, right? It's just going to be shown like any other movie. Well, then that would activate the deferred payment. So there is a payment. It's a very it's a slight difference, but it is a difference because that way when producers decide to put their student film on Amazon or Netflix or wherever, that is going to mean the deferred payment needs to be paid, even if they only paid you $1,000 for it and you spent $20,000 on your film, right? You haven't made any money, but you do need to pay the performers. It also gives the performer a little bit of control in that they have to give their consent for it to go outside of the realm of where student films can go. So that way, if you are in a student film and it's going to do something, you have to acknowledge, yes, I know the student film I did is going to be shown to more people than I thought it was going to be shown. And you might or might not want to give such consent. One of the, there are a couple of advantages to the students for using the student film agreement. First of all, having experience working with SAG-AFTRA performers who know how to behave on set, know what to expect on set. They don't get, every time someone flubs the line, they don't, lose their mind laughing for 10 minutes because it was so funny, even if it was. The other advantage that I hear a lot from some of the UPMs and ADs that I work with are student producers who use the student film agreement. One of the things they do is they have to fill out the Exhibit Gs, just like you do on every other. And having that opportunity to fill out the Exhibit G makes you more marketable when you graduate college and you're going for those jobs. I had a UPM on a show who told me that they hired somebody because they did student films in college on a SAG-AFTRA contract, and they knew how to fill out an Exhibit G, and they knew that is going to save them so much money in paperwork errors because they knew what they were doing. So that's one thing I always recommend is you do a favor for yourself as a producer doing the paperwork and getting that practice. So that way, when you get the job, you're like, oh yeah, Exhibit G, whatever. Do that all the time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I've seen a lot of schools also use the micro. So those two work really, and I've seen some use the SPA agreement even, which it makes me kind of giggle a little bit because it's the same. It's the same thing almost. The student film does have a budget limit, doesn't it? It's 35.
Yeah, 35.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have a student film that for some crazy reason you have like a $45,000 budget, then they would be in the short project category. With the student films, could they put it on like a non-subscription like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or?
Right. So currently that would require just a little more process. If you're in a situation where you want to put it on YouTube or whatever, and you are not in a position where you can pay the performers, what I recommend is reach out to the business rep you've worked with. We just have to get some various permissions and have various people sign off on it. And so it is possible. It is just not as automatic as it is in some of the other agreements.
So that's where it would differ from, say, the micro budget and the short project agreement, because the
Correct.
free to user platforms are okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
great, awesome. What's the next one up? Michael, you're working on a UPA right now, or right? Didn't you mention that? Ultra low project agreement?
I'm not sure where it actually is falling these days. Allison might be able to actually answer that better than I can, since she's been working with the producer.
Yeah, and then Kalita, my colleague, has also now been speaking with the producer because she's taking over kind of that role and signing the projects instead of me. But I believe it was under the short,
Oh, okay.
but I could be wrong. It could be the it could be the UPA as well. So that particular one, I'm not sure. So sorry about that.
Okay, no, between Jess and Allison, you want to arm wrestle for who's going to talk about the UPA?
I'll give it to Jess.
I could take the UPA. So the UPA, which is the Ultra Low Budget Project Agreement, we just don't use all the letters in the acronym because it would be weirder. The Ultra Low Budget Project Agreement is for a budget up to $250,000, unless it went up to 3,000.
300.
300.
Right?
Okay, yeah. Sorry. And it is, it is just a little step up. The main difference between the, other than the budget difference, is that on the SPA and the student film, where you can defer payment, on the ultra low budget project agreement, the salary to the professional performers is to be paid. It is not deferrable. So you have the minimum rate on the UPA is 20% of what the current day rate is on the full budget agreement, which currently that would be $241. Yeah, $241. It's not July yet. Yeah, $241, and that is for an 8-hour day. Right. So overtime, it is a reduced overtime rate based on rather than the as opposed to the full budget agreement. But it is, you do have to pay the people, and the payroll is due the week following the week of work. So it's not like you can shoot for 10 weeks and then pay them at the end. You do have to pay them, like a regular project, a full budget project. The UPA only covers the professional performers. So that covers performers who are professional, whether that's being a member of SAG-AFTRA, which currently, certainly defines someone as a professional, or one of the sister unions, AGMA, AGVA, Actors Equity, something like that, or a performer who has a resume and training consistent with that of a professional. So kind of using the student agreement, the example that I always use, if your next door neighbor is an anthropologist and wants to be in your movie, that's great. They can still be in your movie. You just don't have to cover them on a SAG-AFTRA contract the way you do with the professional performers. The professional performers, you cover under the SAG-AFTRA contract. You do the SAG-AFTRA agreement with them. You put them on the Exhibit Gs. You pay them weekly, overtime, etc. Your anthropologist neighbor, you know what? They say, if you make me dinner, I'll be in your film. Great. That's all we need to know. You don't have to put them on any Exhibit Gs. You don't have to do a contract, anything like that. And that is the main difference. The other thing to be prepared for as a producer is, at that level, we start to take a little more protection for our performers. And we do that by way of a security deposit, right? So if you've ever rented a house or an apartment, you put down a security deposit. You live there for however long you live there. When you're ready to move out, if you haven't trashed the place, you get your security deposit back. SAG-AFTRA security deposit's essentially the same thing. You pay the security deposit, you film your movie, you don't trash the place, meaning that all of the rules are followed and there are no issues. Then you get your security deposit back. I mention that now because it is something you need to figure into your budget, right? It is not money that you're spending, but money that is being held for a little while, right? It is not that money that you use to pay the performers. You need that money on top of paying the performers. And then the sooner that all of the final paperwork is in and everything's turned in, then the sooner you get the deposit returned. And how much the deposit is, that is dependent on several factors: how long you shoot, how many performers, the day rate of the performers. All of that figures into the calculation of the security deposit. So it's not like I can just give you a percentage of your budget or your performer budget to come up with that number now. That would be a conversation you would have with your signatory rep after you fill out the application.
I think that's really important because that is one of the sticking points when I've talked to other filmmakers and things like that when they're at that level, is that sometimes comes as a surprise to them. And I feel like security deposit is the absolute best way to explain it. And I usually tell them, I'm like, think about that money. Like, you can use that money for marketing or film festival fees, or, it's money that's being just held on to, and you can factor that into your post-production and marketing budget later. But it's not, because I have had people say, well, does that mean that SAG-AFTRA pays the actors out of that security deposit? And it's important to understand that that is separate from everything. So you're not pulling that money out of what you have budgeted for the actors, it's in addition. And the same thing with pension and health, that pension and health is an additional expense on top of the paycheck. Like, it's not coming out of our paycheck, it's in addition to our paycheck. So do you want to talk a little bit about pension and health, just like in a very light, digestible way?
Yeah, that is something you need to take into consideration when you budget for your performers. Whatever the rate is for the performer, you need to add the percentage for pension and health, which is currently 21%. So if you're going to hire a SAG-AFTRA performer for one day, I'm going to use easy numbers because I'm not good with math. You're going to use them one day and you're going to pay them $100, which is under scale, but easy math, right? That you need to budget $121 because, like you said, CarrieAnne, the pension and health payment is not a payroll deduction. It is an employer contribution that is paid on top of the performer's wages.
Yeah, and to also, like you were saying before, like with one of those other productions, to also think about overtime. Like, I would always say budget for overtime, and then it'll be a great surprise if make your days and they end up being somehow in some magical universe shorter than you thought they would be. Always plan for them to be longer. And I think that's one benefit of having SAG-AFTRA actors on your set, is that when you've got a SAG-AFTRA actor, we don't just get to join the union whenever we feel like it. We have to earn our membership. We have to meet requirements to join. So when you're hiring a SAG-AFTRA actor, you're hiring a professional that has been on set before, that knows how to not, like you were saying, if somebody flubs a line, to keep going, that kind of understands the process, that knows how to hit their mark, that understands framing, all those things, because those things save you time. And we all know time is money. And the longer you shoot, the more you pay everyone, your crew and your cast. And so if you've got actors that are trained professionals, you're more likely to make your day, because you've got actors that are going to come in prepared. They know what to expect. They know how to behave, all that stuff.
I cannot stress that part enough. The idea, it is such an abstract thing to think about, how much money you save by having a professional who is not going to be wasting time on set. Having worked on a variety of sets, I know that like a set that has at least one union actor who has been through this can really make that time much more efficient, so much more efficient.
When they're going to come in, they're going to come in prepared too, because they understand, that they need to, I mean, this sounds really silly, but they understand that, I need to know my lines, and I need to be able to hit my mark and be engaged and do all my actor preparation so that I'm right there in the moment. I know how to stay in the moment, even if something goes a little unplanned, because sometimes those are the beautiful moments on camera that you can ruin by going, oh no, I'm sorry, I dropped the fork, instead of just picking it up and rolling with it. And that really does save a lot of time. A film that I directed recently, that was a micro, is now on the film festival circuit. And we brought in a SAG-AFTRA actor for one of our leads, and he was incredible. And we had a professional actor and a SAG-AFTRA actor, a professional performer is what I mean. We're both professionals, but a professional performer who is a pre-member, and then we had a SAG-AFTRA member, and it was just lovely because they both just came in and did their jobs, and they were prepared and they were connected to each other. And it's understanding when you know you've got a performer who's been on a set before that understands how much time it takes for like lighting setups and camera setups, and you know that if you're shooting outside, you can't do 47 takes, you know, because that can push you into a whole other day, which can cost you thousands of dollars. So, you know, you really are. That's not to say that a non-union performer isn't going to be that professional. It's just about like if you're hiring somebody that you don't know, you've got a better chance of somebody coming in and being on their A game and knowing what to expect when you hire a union actor.
Someone who's going to set
And I
the
just
tone
wanted,
for the
I wanted
entire-
to jump in. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying, someone who sets the tone for the entire shoot. You know, that kind of behavior is contagious for those who may be on the set for the first time.
Yeah, and it's also great for those newer actors, right? Because then they go, oh, this is, you know, then they up
You
their
could
game.
do it.
Yeah. Because I remember when I was a pre-member, I got cast as a lead opposite, like the romantic lead in a indie film opposite a SAG-AFTRA actor, and it was a huge learning experience for me. It was really incredible. So I feel like it's good for everyone. Alison?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because these are all great points, but I just wanted to go back a little bit when you were speaking about the pension and health. The pension and health is paid on all performers that are covered and put under a SAG-AFTRA contract, not just members. And so in each agreement, who we cover is different. And so, like we said before, on a micro, the pension and health is not paid at all. On a student film and a UPA, it's any professional performer. So that means members or anyone who is professional, and we give them a SAG-AFTRA contract. But under the short project agreement, the SPA, we cover all performers, whether they're members or not. They have to be put under a SAG-AFTRA contract, and their pension and health is paid, whether they're a member or not. I think that's really important, and it can be confusing depending on what agreement you're working under. But it's, you know, I just wanted to mention that because a lot of producers do not understand. They think only SAG-AFTRA members are paid the pension and health, and that's not true. And also, too, I don't know if you want us to talk about the pathway to membership with these agreements, because I know we're, you know, focusing and talking to producers, but it's good for them to know as well.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, because something happened recently where on a micro, they thought that, you know, a performer could get eligibility and have a Taft-Hartley on their behalf, and so that they could join SAG-AFTRA, and that's not the case. And the performers are signing that performer acknowledgement form on a micro, and it states there that there is no pathway to eligibility, pathway to join when you work on a micro. Whereas on a student film and a UPA, if you're under the SAG-AFTRA contract, then you have to get 3 principal performer jobs, and then on either a student or a UPA, and you can join, and you go through the employment verification process. So it's different. It's not a Taft-Hartley, like on the higher budgets where a producer fills out a Taft-Hartley form, you're cleared for work, and then you can become eligible. So on the student film and the UPA, what they would do is send in their performer contracts through an email address that's given on their contracts when they're ready to join, but they do have to have 3. And then just to make it more complicated, the short project agreement is different because you can join with just 1 principal role, and then it's still the employment verification pathway to membership. You take your employment contract, your performer contract, it has to be fully executed, signed by the producer, not just the copy you have and the producer hasn't signed it. The producer has to sign the contract, and then you email that in when you're ready to join. So you're not just sitting in our database eligible. So it works a little bit differently than the Taft-Hartley, which makes you eligible to join.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. What I usually tell people is that the onus is on the producer for a Taft-Hartley and the onus is on the actor for employment verification. And
Right.
with the Taft-Hartley, you're going to be in the system. So if you tell somebody that you're eligible, they can look it up and see. And if you're doing employment verification, and you can be eligible depending on, well, here's a can of worms, but if you're in a right to work state, you can be eligible until the end of time. But if you're in a union state, then you become a must join at some point. But if you're doing employment verification, it's on you. And then also that's for when you're ready to join right then and there, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So eligibility has more of a ramp to it depending on where you are, and employment verification is right here, right now. Yes. Oh, yeah. No, that's a great point because I just saw something in a forum where somebody was asking about that. The other thing I see people asking about quite a bit, and this might be getting into the weeds a teeny tiny bit, but if there's a simple way to answer, people ask about extras on these contracts a lot. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So extras, background performers, coverage of background performers is something that is negotiated. It is not something the union just sets rules for. It is negotiated with the AMPTP, and then which is kind of the parent agreement for all of these other agreements. And on the East Coast, we have coverage of background in a 300 air mile circle around Columbus Circle, New York. What does that mean for us here? It extends down to just south of Richmond, Virginia. So in Atlanta, in Miami, in Chicago, in all those places, we do not have coverage of background performers. So whereas in those, within the background zone, they have to cover a certain number of background performers per day, based on the contract level, right? So if you're in the background zone and you're doing a moderate, it's different than if you're doing a low or a full budget. In Georgia, we don't have coverage over background in the contracts that we're talking about today. We have coverage in some other, like, game shows and serial, soap operas, commercials. But in terms of what we're talking about today, film and television, new media, we don't have background coverage. So that would not be a covered position.
And that's something where if you're watching this and you're thinking, I have a super specific question or anything like that, you can always email Alison or Jess. You can find their contact information on SAG-AFTRA.org. If you go and look up the locals and look up the Atlanta local, you'll see email addresses and phone numbers for both of them. They're wonderful angels of people and will help you out. So
there might be contact information on the website for this panel for the Atlanta Film Festival as well.
Yeah, there could be. I don't know. But yeah, and so I mean, I would say this, if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my head's gonna explode from all this information, the point of this panel is really to put you at ease and to let you know that we're here, that the community is here for you. Like whether it's, Alison or Jess, or, if you see Michael or me around the film festival, you go, hey, I watched that panel and I either want to give you a high five or I have a million questions, we'll probably stop and talk to you for a minute if we have the time to. But the biggest thing here is that we're trying to really rally the indie film community, because there's so much beautiful art out there that's just waiting to be made and so many incredible stories needing to be told. And, we just want to be helpful and we want you to be able to realize your vision. And so don't worry if you're feeling like your head is if you're like, oh my gosh, my brain is soup. This is so much information. You can always go and look on the production center at SAG-AFTRA.org. You can go to SAGIndie.org and look there. So our whole point is just to kind of help put you at ease, let you know that we're all here for you. Everyone is rooting for you. The union is not against you, like I can really only speak for our Atlanta local office because that's who I've done all my producing work through, but they're incredible. You guys are always ready and solution oriented too. So if you think, oh, I want to do this, but I don't know about this, or I want to do this, but I don't know if I qualify, they're going to help you figure out the right path for you, and they're not going to be mad at you for asking or anything like that. So that's just my little PSA for our local office.
We had talked about making sure you read first before asking questions. And Alison had mentioned people asking questions that should have been obvious. I am a person who can read something 1,000 times and then ask the most obvious question. And I might be embarrassed doing it, but I have found that even asking things that I think are dumb questions that are going to embarrass me are going to at least get me an answer. Even if the person on the other end is going, "You should know this," and I'm like, "Thank you." Appreciate that.
Oh, no, that's totally okay. It's just, if we know that you've tried or you said, oh, I looked this up or I can't remember, I know I knew this before. It's just sometimes, we get those calls and, or emails where we know they haven't even, looked. But I mean, no question is dumb, no question is stupid, and we're here to answer any question.
Yeah, and so we've got a couple of minutes left. We're right about close to our time. Do you want to, either one of you, just want to give a quick breezy overview of the moderate and the low? You don't have to get into the weeds of it, but just maybe like the budget requirements and just the general things.
Yeah, the main things to know about the moderate and the low is that as your budget increases, right? So a moderate low budget is for something that is under $700,000, and low budget is still 1.5 million or below, I believe.
It's 2
That
point, it was 2.5. Allison?
I was gonna say
Yeah, I
things
don't
I
have
should
it
have
pulled
looked
up
up.
right now either, so I'd have to look
Oh,
it up.
yep,
but-
2 million, 2 million. So I apologize.
Even we have to look stuff up sometimes.
Right.
Yep. The main thing to know, that the main difference between the ultra low budget project and the moderate low budget project is that at the moderate low budget project, the MPA is at the level where you do cover all performers, professional or not. So now the anthropologist neighbor who says, "Here's your chicken marsala, Mr. So-and-so," now they get a SAG-AFTRA contract because they are principal performer. That is the main difference as you move up the ladder, as you step up. With both the moderate low budget and the low budget agreements, there are some incentives in which you can, if you are meeting certain criteria, specifically around diversity and casting, you can essentially spend more money without being raised to the next level, right? It will increase the budget without bumping you from a moderate to a low or a low to a full. And those are all things too that you can discuss with the signatory rep once you're assigned a signatory rep.
Yeah, I feel like anytime you're getting into the bigger contracts, you definitely want to start with a conversation. When you're doing like the micro budget or the spa agreement, I feel like those are pretty self-explanatory, and you can really be almost fully prepared right when you talk to the rep, because it's just not nearly as in depth, because it's not as, you're not spending $1 million, you're spending probably, $1,000 and pulling a bunch of favors from anybody who will help you, but thank you so much, everybody, for being here and having this discussion. I hope that if you're an actor or a filmmaker and an aspiring producer, an actor who wants to make their dreams come true and is tired of waiting on other people, so you just want to get out there and make something, which I definitely encourage. I hope that you walk away from this conversation empowered and curious and ready to go make your film. So thank you very much. Anybody else have any parting gems they'd like to say?
That was quite a basket of gems at the end.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the festival.